Hi guys, I wanted to do a quick follow-up video on the playlist for the planning phase as a founder. So hopefully I will link it up there somewhere. Hopefully you've watched the other videos. We talked about the initial planning stages as well as some of the information that you want to think about and know before you get started on the process. So I wanted to kind of summarize that as well as talk about like the next step as you get into what I would call actually implementing your plan. Okay. So in the beginning, we talked about first defining what a hybrid school is, as far as it being a 2 or 3 day a week program that's running half or fewer days of the required school year. And most likely the parents are homeschooling. Again, that's because a private school registration and licensing and all of that, depending on your state, is usually a different track that's a lot more regulated. But you can check out that video. It's certainly possible, especially if you're working like with a church. But we're defining a hybrid school as a 2 or 3 day a week program with a very close partnership with the families. I also did a video on the hybrid home partnership because that's something that you really need to think through as far as who you're admitting, how you're going to communicate with your parents, what you're requiring them to do, and all of that part of like the curriculum and what they're doing at home and what you're doing at school and how much you're assigning and how much you're not. Okay, so check out that video also. So we talked about that partnership. We talked about what the hybrid model actually is. In one of the videos, I talked about some kind of brainstorming some models. So you can do, like I said, a 2 day a week model is very popular. Doesn't have to be 36 weeks of the year. It could be 33, it could be 30, it could even be 28. It could be 3 days a week for 24 weeks or 28 weeks. I advised that you stay under half of the days, which is a gray area, as I said, and legally, and it depends on your state, and it's a new territory, pioneering this whole thing. But if you kind of want to like definitely obey a hybrid program, your parents are definitely homeschooling under the homeschool law. If you stay under half of the days, one, it keeps it more affordable, but it also just kind of gives you an extra piece of evidence that you are not actually operating as a full-time school. So that's just something to think of. Okay, so we talked about what the model could look like. We talked about doing all of the subjects. You could do, the math and the reading and the writing and the spelling, skills-based subjects, as well as all the enrichment stuff, the outdoor time, recess, history, science, all, artists, art, music, artists or composer study. You might do all of those things. Our program does all of those things in 2 days a week with short lessons. Or you might decide you're going to focus maybe only on the skills subjects and have parents focus on the other things at home, or vice versa. You let them do the skills subjects almost entirely at home, in which case you probably want to have shorter days so they can get in their 5 days. And then you do the enrichment at school. You could do that 2 days, you could do that 3 days, you could even do that 4 days, especially because if you're not teaching the skills, you're letting the parents do that at home and you have shorter days. That could be a really good model to try. Okay, so you want to understand your model. And then we talked a bit about your market research and your mission. And like I said, you're gathering all this information and you're trying to figure out what your market is going to support, what your community is going to support, what your competition is offering, what other choices do people have out there. So I really recommend going through the process by doing some market research first. Okay, I have a market validation guide on my website that you can grab that will just help you through, well, how do I do that, right? I have it broken up into like a 6-week process where you just focus on one thing each week, and that will help you reach out into your community, which also helps kind of spread the word so people know what you're doing, know what you're thinking about, but you're also hearing from people, getting the interest. So I recommend starting there while you're doing that, or probably while you're doing that, or before you're doing that. You want to like really zero in on your personal mission. What is your goal? What is your heart for doing this? That's going to help inform the like pedagogy what kind of education you're delivering. And I talked a little bit about how the pedagogy is often why you're doing this. There are no other schools that will offer in any kind of school sometimes, or at least not within an affordable range, that offer a particular type of education. And so there's this huge gap in delivering the type of education that maybe you want for your kids, or that you believe in teaching, or that you know your community needs. And a hybrid school can be a really accessible, affordable way to deliver that method of education without getting into private school founding territory. You also want to understand your state laws as far as like ESAs or tax credits, or, however the payment might be easier for parents to afford. In my state, we don't have any of that yet. So we just have to look at like just the numbers, like you pay the tuition or you don't pay the tuition. There's no reimbursement or anything in Pennsylvania right now, but you do want to understand that too. Okay. So you want to zero in on your mission statement, which is going to help you understand your pedagogy. You want to be really clear on that. You want to be doing your market research and your market validation. Don't let it scare you too much with people's opinions. That's why you want to be really clear on your mission. And then you're going to be getting a more concrete model in your head of exactly what this program is going to look like, as far as how frequently it's going to meet, and what subjects it's going to cover. And in there, you're going to have to do some work on finances. Now, in the strategic planning course, I have a whole section on where I literally walk you through a workable budget that I managed to budget for many years for our programs that grew by more than 10 times size. And there's a lot of things to manage, as far as when do we grow, and when do we add this person, and when do we give these people a raise, and when can we afford adding training, and there's a lot of decisions to make in that. But if you start knowing what your costs are realistically, which is what I'm trying to help you do, because some of it I didn't learn for several years, that I just didn't know that I needed to put that in there, or what the actual real cost of things was going to be. You want to work out a budget so that you also can work backward from that into your tuition, okay? So that you know how much revenue you need to bring in per child. If you're not going to fund it entirely with tuition, let's say you are going to be a nonprofit and maybe you're going to charge lower tuition, but then you're going to fundraise, or maybe it's entirely donor supported. That's possible. You still need to know the cost per child so that you can understand what your real costs are. And then you can set fundraising goals, okay? Or what your tuition is going to have to be for what you're thinking, including your own salary. And then, which needs to be realistic so you don't burn yourself out, as well as all of your people, all your teachers, your aides, any administrative help that you need, bookkeepers and all of that kind of thing. You want to know the reality of that so you can set your tuition, and then you want to make sure that your market can actually support the number that you come up with, okay? So you're going through that mission statement, the market validation, you're going through your finances. I also did a video on your role as a founder, what part you're going to play in this organization. I think that's really important for you to understand. And as you move forward, that you're working in an area of your strengths, and that you're putting people around you who are good at what they do and who probably fill your gaps, who are good at something that you're not good at, and you can trust them with that and communicate with them to make sure that the whole organization is run really well, okay? So once all that's done, I talked to you in another video about walking through just a really simple strategic plan, which is going to include all of these pieces of information. You just take all those pieces of information and you come up with, okay, this is what I need to go do. This is what I need to go do. And once you have all of that, you have 3 to 5 goals probably for your first 6 months or a year. When you're first launching, you probably want to keep them fairly short as far as your timeline, because you're going to have a lot to do to get things going. But from then on, you can set 2 or 3 year goals. It is very wise, I think, to set your vision out 3 years, even now, but you may not need to go through every little task that needs to happen for the next, 3 years. You just want to know, here's where I would like to be in 3 years. And maybe I want my program to be this size. I want to be serving kids this age. I want to have my tuition at this amount. I want to be making this much money. You might want to have a vision that's set out 3 years so that you can make sure your 1-year vision is matching up with your 3-year goals. But then within that 1 year, break that down into smaller tasks that you need to do. Set yourself a timeline, set some accountability, and figure out like, oh, I might need to go get people to help me with this, or I need to hire this out, or whatever. Okay. So you've got a plan now. All right. So you've got your mission statement, you've got your financials, you've got your market research, you know where you're going to be in this organization, you've got your model, and now you have a little plan. Okay. So your next steps going to the next phase are going to be like your paperwork and your facilities. That's going to be like the first step going into the implementation. So you can do those two things at the same time. I'll talk more about those in like a future series. But your paperwork is going to be like becoming an actual organization with your state, which is going to be filling out like articles of incorporation, usually, whether you're an LLC or a nonprofit. You're sending in a couple pages with a fee to your state. You're getting an EIN from the IRS, and then you are opening a bank account. Okay, those are like the 3 first steps. If you're a nonprofit, you also need to get together some board members and approve some bylaws and start training your board. Very important that you do that right from the beginning. Okay, you have 2 years to get your 501c3 status with the IRS. Don't really worry about that right now in the beginning. Right now, you're training your board. I have a board training series right here. It's just the 101 basics for people who've never been on boards before. So make sure you watch that as a founder. Make sure that you have your board members watch that, at least just to get started. There's a whole bunch more training that boards can use, but you want them to at least understand the basics, and you want to understand the basics as a founder, what they're supposed to be doing and what they're not supposed to be doing. Okay. But in either case, you're sending in that paperwork you're getting your employer identification number, and you are opening a bank account at some point soon. Okay. You also want to start finding a facility. This is also where your 3-year vision is kind of important, because it will help you not just think in 1 year and then like the next year you're like, oh no, we outgrew our space and it's not big enough. You may have to do that, but you don't want to do it if you don't have to. So if you're going to get at least a space that fits your 3-year vision, at least, it gives you some time to like just make sure everything is moving along. Your administration is good. Your teachers are good. Your students are good. Everything's working. The finances are working. It gives you some time to like just stabilize your program without having to think about moving, because moving is energy draining and money draining and difficult to do if you have to do it a whole bunch. Okay. So you want to look for a facility that fits your 3-year vision. And it often takes several months to search, communicate with the buildings and get things rolling and hear from the right people and all of that. So you want to get started on that pretty much as soon as you are pretty sure your market can afford and wants what you are offering. You understand what your model is going to be, like how many classrooms you need, big they need to be, what ages the kids are going to be. Okay, you want to be clear on that before you're looking for a building, whether you need outdoor space. You want to think at least a teeny bit through things like safety stuff. You don't have to have all those details in place, but you want to think about the in and out of the doors and locks and the area around the building and, that kind of thing. You just want to have thought about it so that you know about questions that you can ask when you're looking at facilities. So I will talk more about that in another video, because most of my experience is talking to churches. Purchases are usually not on the table in the very beginning. Commercial leases could be. If you're going to do a commercial lease, you want to make sure that you have a very realistic number for your rent for that, because it's usually going to be pretty high for a hybrid program, because anything where you have to pay full-time rent numbers with a part-time program that's why a lot of hybrid programs are from churches, because they can pay just for the days they're there. But if you're opening like 2 programs, like a 2-day program and a 3-day program, and you are going to be having revenue 5 days a week for the program, a commercial lease is much more feasible. So just make sure that whatever you're thinking is feasible financially and fits into your budget, so that you know what the realities of that are. I'm not going to talk about purchasing or buying because that is not usually on the table for a startup program. It could be several years down the road. but it's just a very expensive thing to do usually. So anyway, paperwork and facilities are your next couple of steps. Once you're clear on that planning part, make sure that you have just your priorities. You've done the first planning stages, and you will be well on your way toward getting your program launched and doing it confidently and knowing that your market's going to support it. You know what you're doing, and you're going to be able to move into the next steps feeling confident about what you're doing. So I will be working on another series for that. Check that out. I will link that. And I hope that this was helpful.